Isso não é um lançamento de notebook. Esse é o seu lançamento. Os aí PCs da Lenovo com processadores Intel Core Ultra 9 aprendem com você e personalizam as necessidades do seu negócio, permitindo que os seus dados fiquem sempre protegidos. Essa é uma das várias soluções para ajudar você a ser mais você. Saiba mais em www.lenovo.com/IA para você.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years' experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Good afternoon, folks. This is Steve Moore. This is the More Money Show. This is WABC Radio, the number one talk radio station in these United States of America. It is, oh, what a joy it is to be on the air today with you. By the way, as soon as this show is over, I'll be getting on a plane. I am flying. You're going to think I'm insane. I know my wingman here, Tim Desher, thinks I'm insane, but I'm going to Chicago, where the high over the next 3 days is supposed to be 18 degrees, the high temperature, and it's going to be as low as 3 degrees. So it's going to be very, very frosty, very, very cold. But, you know, that's what you want at Christmas time, unless you're headed to Florida or something like that. But this is the best time of the year. I hope everybody has a holly jolly Christmas. I can't stop smiling, A, because Donald Trump is going to be president in less than a month, and B, because this is a wonderful time of the year. So I am live. This is live, right, Tim? We are live. And we have Ava as our wingman in New York, and we have Tim Desher here, who is here in our DC studio helping me out today. Thank you, Tim. So we're going to have a lot of fun today. We will be taking your calls. Incidentally, most radio stations at this time of day on a Saturday afternoon are going to be giving you infomercials, you know, really boring stuff, or they're going to have canned stuff that you've heard many times before. We are live in color. That's the wonderful thing about WABC. Amazing. This is one of the few stations in the country. You get 5 hours of economics and politics and finance. You get 3 hours of the great Larry Kudlow. And then I'm so honored to follow him with 2 hours on the More Money Show. So a lot of fun today. By the way, we've got some great guests coming up, but most importantly, we will be taking calls from you. Let's see, it's 1-800-848-9222. Is that right, Tim? Yes. 1-800-848-9222 or 1-800-848-WABC. Don't call in yet, because we'll start taking your calls probably closer to the bottom of the hour. So maybe in 15, 20 minutes, we'll be taking your calls. The subject today, and look, we're all in a good mood. We're in a holly jolly mood. So we want to keep this upbeat, but I want to hear from you about what your number one wish is for the country in terms of this Christmas. You know, what's your Christmas wish for not yourself, but for our country? What do you want to see changed? I want to see our financial system changed. I want to see these massive deficits and this massive spending spree in Washington go away and get back to the principles of America, which is a limited government with very limited powers, and a government that balances budget, pays its bills, has a pro-growth tax system, and doesn't regulate America to death. Those are some of the things on my list of what I want to see. That's what I want Santa to bring me on Christmas morning. But I want to hear from you. What do you want? What do you want for our country? Not for yourself. I mean, we all want presents for ourselves, but I'm talking about what we want to see for our country. Before we get to that, I want to make a few opening comments about what's going on in America today. Number one, this was a brutal week for the stock market. And I was just actually on Fox News a little earlier talking about this. And I made the point that, you know, stick with the program. Don't panic. In fact, if anything, I really believe right now is a buying opportunity after this brutal week of sell-off, because good times are coming. We got Donald Trump coming in. He's going to cut taxes. He is going to promote more American energy. He is going to deregulate the economy and get the government off the back of our businesses. We've got the people at Doge, Elon Musk, who are going to find hundreds of billions of dollars of waste in our economy. So we are super excited about all of those things, and they're all going to help the stock market and help the American economy grow. So look, I am not I don't always get this right, and I'm not telling you that it's going to just be an upward spiral to the economy. What I am telling you, though, is that we're going to see good times ahead for the country, and there will be things that happen that we don't even know about. It took Ronald Reagan 18 months for him to straighten out the economy after the disaster of Jimmy Carter. I don't think it's going to take that long for Steve Forbes. I think we could do it in less than 18 weeks and maybe even 18 days, given how fast he wants to hit the ground running. A few quick points, other things that are going on in the country. By the way, Tim, we still have listeners that do not get the hotline. I don't understand why people, we have over 100,000 people who get it in the morning. It's free. There's no reason why somebody would not get the hotline. If you want to know about the economy, if you want to know about finance, politics, or you want a little humor, because we always provide a humor item in the morning, and it costs you nothing. All you have to do is go to unleashprosperity.com. Send us just sign up for the hotline. If you like it, we'll keep sending it to you 5 mornings a week. If you don't like it, just unsubscribe. But you can read this in 5 minutes every morning. It has a lot of pictures and all of that kind of stuff. So that's point number one. Point number two, I just want to make a quick point about what's going on with the new census numbers, and we'll get into this deeper in the show because my friend Steve Forbes and my colleague Steve Forbes is waiting to come on in just a couple of minutes. But I wanted to tell you that the growth states, the states that had the increase in population. This is not going to be a surprise to virtually anyone who's a regular listener to this show. The top states were, I'm going to read them off to you in terms of the ones that got the most domestic migration. That is where people moving to. Okay. Texas, number 1. North Carolina came in number 2. South Carolina 3. Florida, number 4. Tennessee, number 5. Are you detecting a pattern here? All these are the southern states. Then you add Arizona, which is a southwestern state. And then you add Alabama, and Georgia. So those are the top states. Gee, I wonder if there's if the South is rising again. And the answer is yes. And unfortunately, because I know so many of our listeners are in New York and New Jersey, those were 2 of the 3 biggest losing states. The only state that lost more was California. Incidentally, California and New York, if they stay on the same path that they're on of losing population of American citizens to other states, California and New York will lose, I'm just counting this up, they're going to lose seven congressional seats between those 2 states. And they're all going to be in states like North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, and Florida. So Texas, look, New York has to clean up its act. It's that simple. We're going to take a quick break because we got Steve Forbes online. We'll be back right in 1 minute with the great Steve Forbes. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
E aí, Noyers, aqui é a Camila Frender do É Noia Minha. Eu tô participando do Amigo Secreto de Podcasters do TikTok. E sabe quem que eu tirei? Natália Souza, do Para Dar Nome às Coisas. Meu presente é um livro que tá bombando no TikTok. É O Avesso da Pele, do Jefferson Tenório. Uma história linda sobre a complexidade das relações humanas.
O TikTok esse ano fez milhões de pessoas voltarem a ler. Um simples TikTok pode gerar um grande impacto. Descubra livros incríveis e muito mais no TikTok.
Estou passando nesse podcast para dividir uma informação que fez toda a diferença na minha vida. Quer fazer pós-graduação, mas tá impossível correr de um lugar para o outro?
Pois é, ainda mais com o trânsito.
Então você precisa conhecer a educação à distância do Senac. Sabia que é nota máxima no MEC? E tem diversos cursos de pós-graduação para te levar ainda mais longe. 100% online, sem necessidade de TCC e com acesso direto a todos os professores.
Ah, saber isso fez diferença sim.
Inscreva-se já na pós-graduação EAD. Quer saber? Senac EAD.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. I am your host, Steve Moore, and one of the great economists and financial minds in the country is my partner at Unleash Prosperity, along with Larry Kudlow and along with Art Laffer, and that is Steve Forbes, who is just a mastermind when it comes to how our economy works. He should have been president in 1992 or 1996 when he ran for president. He is an amazing intellect. And Steve Forbes, thanks for joining.
Well, great to be with you. And 2 Steves make for future prosperity.
There you go. Merry Christmas to you, my friend. Okay, I've got a lot to cover with you, Steve Forbes. I'm getting a lot of calls and emails and texts from my listeners and our hotline readers who are very concerned about what happened with the stock market this week. It was a brutal week for the stock market, Steve, as you know. I'm going to blame this on the Fed. I don't understand why the Fed is doing what they're doing with the interest rates, and their job is to keep the dollar strong and stable and to keep inflation under control. And nobody understands what their policy is. And I'm going to say this, Stephen, I want you to react to this. When you have the Fed make a decision and an announcement, and then the market loses over $1 trillion in market capitalization value, I think there's something very serious wrong at the Fed.
There is something very seriously wrong at the Fed, which is why Donald Trump is going to have a very big fight with the Federal Reserve, with Chairman Powell in the coming year. And it's not about the independence of the Fed or the level of interest rates. It's about the models on which the Federal Reserve is run. Basically, and we've discussed this for a long time, the Fed believes you fight inflation by depressing the economy. It's called the Phillips curve. It's not a baseball pitch, but it's the idea that if you want low inflation, you have to have high unemployment. If you want low unemployment, you have to have higher inflation.
So Steve, time out for just 1 second, Steve, because I want you to repeat this because it's such a numbskull idea. How is it that more people working means more inflation? I don't even understand the logic of that.
Well, they feel that if more people are working, people are doing better. That puts pressure on prices. Apparently he's oblivious to them that when prices go up in a normal economy, that tells producers you produce more. People want more.
Right.
And they find ways to actually, through productivity, to make it more affordable. But these people believe in a very rigid world that if you have a lot of prosperity, that's going to raise prices, that'll raise wages, and that's going to mean inflation. Inflation, by its very definition, is lowering the value of the currency, in this case, the dollar, usually by creating too many of them. And but you never hear anyone at the Fed or, in fact, any other central bank talking about stable currencies. That's the definition of inflation. You know, if you get a port clogged in Los Angeles, the Fed can't cure that through interest rates. And this whole idea that the Fed must guide the economy through interest rates, which is a preposterous thing in and of itself. Soviet Union didn't work, that kind of central planning. But the idea that, if we reduce rates, that means the economy will get too healthy too soon and we'll have inflation back again. No, you don't. You have a stable dollar. Reagan did it. Stable dollar, lower tax rates, lower regulations, and by golly, the economy hums. But the idea that these people must depress the economy is one that's going to lead to a big fight. The media won't get it, but we have to hammer home. People doing well is not the problem.
Well, Steve, there's another issue here. By the way, I was just looking at some of the books that you've written. I don't know which one is your most recent because you've written so many great books. I know he wrote the book on inflation. He wrote the book called Inflation. And also you've written a great book called Reviving America. I hope that Steve Forbes reads that book. So you are the expert on inflation and monetary policy, Steve. And I guess I'm bewildered by how it is that when you have a prosperous economy, when you cut taxes, somehow the Fed is saying that that's going to cause inflation. In other words, what's coming out now from the sources at the Fed is that Jerome Powell is afraid that Donald Trump's pro-growth policies will cause inflation. Jerome Powell thinks cutting tax rates is going to cause inflation. That didn't happen under Reagan.
No, it didn't. In fact, it was the exact opposite. And as you know, there was a period of time when the tax cuts fully kicked in, when Volcker stopped the tight money policy and went to a more stable dollar policy, and the inflation of the 70s passed away, thankfully. We had periods of growth of 8% per annum.
Yes, I remember that.
And out of the Fed were coming rumblings, this is not sustainable. And one other point to make about the Fed, and people just take it for granted because it's happened for so many years, is why is the Fed setting interest rates? That is a form of rent control. We know rent control in real estate is bad, but they used to call the interest on loans renting the money. You rent the money. And so why is the Fed manipulating interest rates? That's a form of rent control. That should be in the hands of the marketplace, not the central bank. And if they want a stable dollar, all they have to do is make sure they don't print too much money. And the best barometer, of course, is the gold price, but that's a taboo these days. So you can look at the gold price, but you can look at commodity prices as well. Greenspan did it for a while. Volcker did it for a while. And that'll lead you from that'll prevent you from going off the rails. But the Fed right now is floundering, and that's why they need to be challenged. And I think
I agree with
that is coming.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I know Donald Trump agrees with you as well. I've had conversations with him about this, and look, I think Jerome Powell, is overrated. I think he's the one who let inflation go up to 9.2% in 2022. He almost choked off the economic expansion. Remember, we had under Trump because he kept raising interest rates, and it seems like they're just making it up as they go along. Now, I wanted to ask you, Steve, about something.
One other point on this thing. Yes. Just to hit the Fed again, rightly so, is this whole thing of, their policy of 2% inflation, which everyone accepts now. Nobody knows the real origins of it. It goes back to New Zealand in the 1980s. But anyway, how do you measure inflation? And we've discussed this on with you and with Larry and others, is they leave out on the CPI, Consumer Price Index, they leave out interest payments. Interests are a big cost of living. They used to be in the Consumer Price Index till the early 1980s, when for nefarious reasons of reducing Social Security benefits in the future, they took out interest rates. So the interest you pay on the mortgage, on car loans, on credit cards is not included as a cost of living. So that what you might call the real inflation rate is much higher than the 3% with the number bandied about today. So the whole 2% thing is nonsense.
That's a great point, by the way, because none other than Larry Summers, who's not, he's not one of us when it comes to the economy, but he did some calculations that said, like, if we had used the old calculation of, defining and measuring inflation, that back in the last 3 years, when I said the inflation rate hit 9.2%, he said the inflation rate would have been about 13% under the old rules because, the high interest rates. You're so right about that. You mentioned gold. I know you and I have had a lot of discussions about the best way to anchor the money supply so that we don't have runaway inflation or deflation. Deflation can be harmful too. I've supported more of the broad commodity basket. You supported the gold standard. I think either one of those would be much better than we have right now. But I wanted to ask you about an idea of our mutual friend, Judy Shelton, who I think I'm going to have on the show next week. I don't know if you've been following this, Steve, but she came out with a proposal in the Wall Street Journal suggesting a gold-backed federal bond. And I wonder what you think of that idea.
I think that's a good way to get gold out from the closet, so to speak, and issue a gold bond because, again, that's the marketplace speaking. And one of the innovations they made years ago, as you know, was what they call TIPS, in bonds issued by the government that are tied to inflation. Those who own TIPS certainly did well in that for a couple of years when rates were zooming up, inflation was zooming up. They got real protection. So yes, that kind of thing is a good thing. Getting the subject out there and there's so many myths, and we discuss it in our book, Inflation, so many myths about the gold standard, that it causes acne and you lose hair and it causes grasshoppers to flourish and crops to fail.
Well, can it cause me to lose weight?
I wish. I'm into that to all of us, especially at this time of year. But again, the market will tell you. People will tell you in the marketplace if they have trust in the dollar. And so the Fed's one good thing will never happen with this crew at the Fed. If they just announced that henceforth their goal is a stable value for the dollar stability, that would change the whole marketplace. You don't have to worry that they're going to trash the economy. And one thing on that, if you get a raise in pay do you feel you start to overheat at night? The Fed says when the economy's doing well, it overheats, like a car. Do people suddenly start getting sweats at night? Oh, I'm overheating. I'm being paid too much. It's just so much nonsense, and it needs to be confronted.
Well, by the way, I just got a tweet from somebody that said, that the Fed's policies are helping me lose weight because food is so expensive. I can't afford to buy it. But Steve, I've got a couple of, by the way, this is the More Money Show on ABC, and I'm talking to the great Steve Forbes. And there's so many questions I have for you, Steve. But I wanted to ask you about, before we leave the subject of the Fed, you saw this study that showed over 80% of these Fed economists, and I think there are over 300 of these PhD economists, mostly from the Ivy League schools, the supposedly super smart guys, and they're all Democrats. Did you know that? They're all Democrats. And there's no, Steve, everybody in Washington talks about diversity. There's no diversity at the Fed.
No, and even worse, there's no diversity in thinking. And that's
right,
why
exactly.
They work so hard. When you got nominated for the Fed board, when Judy got nominated, they wanted to stop that because you and Judy would have asked questions. And the last thing they want is somebody asking real questions instead of, part of the problem with Jerome Powell is not him per se, it's that the Fed's captured him. He's a creature now of the Fed. That's the Fed's the problem. The culture inside the Fed is the problem. So we got to make changes.
Great points. Okay, we've just got a few minutes left. I'm talking to the great Steve Forbes. I wanted to ask you a preview of a piece that you and I have been working on for the last number of weeks. And the working title on this is called Halfway There to a Flat Tax. Now, Steve, you are the godfather of the flat tax, you and Art Laffer. And I've always loved the idea. And by the way, for those who don't know, Steve Forbes can explain it better than I can, but I'm going to make it really simple. You get rid of all the loopholes, you lower the tax rates, and you make it almost like a postcard tax return. And you put a lot of tax accountants out of business, which I like that idea. But we're getting there, Steve. I mean, if Trump could come in and get rid of all the existing, the still existing loopholes, that we could get the rate down to maybe 20%. I know you want to get it down to, I think in your plan, it's 17%. But why don't we just do that? I mean, think of what that would do for the economy.
It would send the economy through the stratosphere, and the Fed would then, it would be working when the Fed starts barking, oh, the economy's overheating. But the single rate system, generous exemptions for adults and for kids, just throw out one number. A family making $53,000 a year in salary would, under a simplified system, owe no federal income tax.
Yeah.
The generous exemptions for adults and for kids. And that would, and when you move ahead, you don't get punished. The rate would remain 17% above $53,000, and you would have a booming economy. And government does well when the economy does well. But one of the dirty little secrets is, unfortunately, our friends on the far left and elsewhere would rather have fewer revenues and more control and more power.
Of course. Yeah. It's all about power. I mean, the whole people talk about draining the swamp in Washington, and I'm, as a swamp creature, I'm very much in favor of that because so much of the power and the money just stays in Washington, D.C. And I've always said this, Steve, if you want to drain the swamp, step one is to have a flat tax, because then the congressmen and the lobbyists, they don't have anything to trade.
Yeah, they can do something useful, like becoming Uber drivers,
right.
Productive in the economy.
So a couple of last questions in our last few minutes, Steve Forbes. One is I'm going to be asking our listeners throughout the show today. We all want presents from Santa Claus ourselves, but what do you want Santa Claus to bring to the country? What are the 2 or 3 things you think would be the best things that could happen for our country in the year ahead?
Well, implementing the positive parts of the agenda. And we saw, unfortunately, recently passing this continuing resolution, how difficult it is. Yeah. And so on the economic side, pass a big fat tax cut bill right away. Don't wait. And that'll make not just a nice Christmas for people, but for perpetual Christmases in the future. Mm-hmm. And as you and Larry and others have pointed out, if you get a good tax bill, cutting tax rates the way you and I and others have proposed, people by the 4th of July or by Labor Day would see their paychecks going up, even if their gross salary remains the same. Everyone working person would get a pay raise. And boy, that's the kind of present you want, a perpetual present of higher pay.
So one last question, Steve Forbes, and that is, I have some real high expectations for Doge. That's the Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy commission that will be looking to find waste and inefficiency, duplication, obsolescence, fraud in the federal budget. What do you think of that? And do you think they can pull this off?
I think they can pull a lot off. You saw one example of it on this continuing resolution. The first one had, 1,500 pages, some obscene thing. And they finally slimmed it down to get us through to March so we can get onto the real agenda when Trump takes office next month. And I think the power of Ramaswamy and Musk is that they have, especially Musk, has the public authority in the minds of the public. And what I hope they do, one of the things they might do is considering doing, remember the base closing commissions?
I do, under Dick Armey. Yep.
Yeah, and so you have people coming, what they should do is come up with proposals of cuts, up or down, no amendments in Congress like they did with those base closings. It was a favorite boondoggle gets hit, they'll vote against it, but everyone else will vote for it. And that way you can get some real perpetual cuts. And so, and the big thing, though, that immediately will boom the economy is not having to rely on Congress. They can start whacking
I love that.
These disastrous regulations. And that would be like a huge tax cut. Get rid of those regulations.
Steve, we're up against a hard break. That's the great Steve Forbes. I'm going to tell you, Steve Forbes, before you drop off, that my hope for the country and what I want to see under the Christmas tree is I want Donald Trump to nominate for the next Federal Reserve Board chairman, Steve Forbes. I hope you will accept that invitation when it is offered to you, Steve Forbes. Thanks so much for joining, my friend. This is the More Money Show on WABC. We'll be taking your calls when we get back.
And so would Art Laffer, and so would David Malpass. So there are plenty of good people out there who can right this bad ship.
Thank you, Steve.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
This is the More Money Show, folks. I am Steve Moore, and we are going to be taking your calls throughout the show. So now we are ready to start taking your calls, so you can call in now. The question of the day is, what do you want Santa Claus to bring, not for yourself, but for our country? What do you want to see happen? What do you want to see under the Christmas tree for our country? As I just said, I'd like to see Steve Forbes nominated as the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, because I think he would do so much better job than the guy we've got there right now. So 1-800-848-9222. Please call in if you have some good ideas about how to improve our country. There are so many of them out there. In the meantime, while we wait for folks to call in, on the More Money hotline, 1-800-848-9222 or 1-800-848-WABC. I want to mention a couple of cool statistics to make you feel good about our country as we approach Christmas Day. This is a statistic we had in the Unleashed Prosperity hotline the other day. And remember to get the hotline by going to unleashedprosperity.com and sign up for it. And it is absolutely free. Some good things in life really are free, and that includes the hotline. But this is an amazing thing. So there was a study that was done, I think it was by Bloomberg, but I'm not sure who it was, but it's a reputable source. And they are finding that over 60% of all the equity in all companies in the world, 60% of those companies are in the United States. In other words, 60% of the wealth that's being created by businesses are created by American businesses, which is incredible given the fact that we are about 6% of the world population, but we're presenting about 60% of the wealth. And these numbers are really pretty incredible because I'm just looking at the chart here. Here it is. U.S. is number one with about 60%. And the next highest, the country that's number two is can you guess what country that is, Tim? It's Japan. Japan, and then UK. And Japan is at 6%. So we're at 60%. Japan's at 60%. We're at 60%. Japan's at 6%. And here's the most amazing thing. China's at 3%. So we have 20 times more wealth than the Chinese do. By the way, we have about 3 times the per capita income that they do. Now, I'm not saying China isn't a threat. They are a threat. They want to take over this global leadership from us. And one of the things that annoys me to no end was we got our own federal regulators are trying to knock down American companies. I don't understand it. They're going after Google. They're going after NVIDIA. They're going after the banks. They're going after everybody. It's unfair. You're doing this and that and the other thing. I mean, what other country in the world has their regulators attack their own companies? I don't. It's so unpatriotic to do this. Now, I'm not saying all our corporations are model citizens. Sometimes they're not. But you take some of these companies like Google or NVIDIA or Microsoft or Apple. I mean, they are amazing. By the way, I was at the Apple store yesterday when I went to the mall to get my wife her Christmas present. I couldn't even fit in the Apple store. So many people wanted to buy Apple products. Now, that's that. When you've got people lining up to get a product from a company, that means they're doing something pretty well. And so I'm sick and tired of our government going after our great American companies. The other thing I want to address, and then I will take a few of your questions, 1-800-848-9222. We still have 2 lines open, so I do want to hear from you folks. I especially want to hear from the ladies. But the other thing that I wanted to mention is this idea of what they call the continuing resolution. And that's this fancy term in Washington, where what we do in Washington is just put the government spending on automatic pilot. We just say, we're just going to spend we're going to give them what they got last year plus a 2 or 3% raise. No. How about this? How about when Donald Trump comes in, we spend what we did last year on the agencies we do need. We get rid of the ones we don't need. And then we do a 10 or 20% reduction in spending. So anyway, we now do we have some callers, Mr. Producer? Okay. Well, let's start with Glenn. Hello, Glenn, you're on.
Very good. I'm glad to finally talk to you. You and Larry Kudrow, I got Sirius Radio in my car, so I can always listen to you. But
oh my God, thank you. So that is very high compliment to be in the same category of Larry Kudlow. He's one of my buddies. He's the best man at my wedding. I love the guy. What do you got for us today, Glenn?
You guys are great, but the thing that I couldn't understand you guys yesterday and the day before, I earned it. I have it. Why are you against the Social Security Fairness Act?
I knew that was going to come. So this is a good question you're asking. And by the way, are you a public employee?
I'm a retired captain from a police department.
Okay. So, Glenn, thank you for calling in. Now, what I'd like you to do, Glenn, if you wouldn't mind, is you make your case. You explain why you think you deserve a higher Social Security benefit, and I'll listen to you with all due respect. So go ahead.
Fantastic. I understand I get a lesser amount, but I paid into Social Security, all the other part-time jobs I worked. I paid into it.
Yeah.
And I have all my quarters for full Social Security. So why can't I get it?
Well, okay. So it's a great point. And I don't know by the way, how many years did you work in the police department?
27. Happily
27
retired.
years. And okay. So here's the thing. And by the way, I'm not an expert on this, so I'm going to confess that from the outset. But I have talked to the actuaries, the people who are the accountants, the people who actually figure out what the Social Security benefits should be. And what they are telling me unanimously is that, people because you also have a private pension, do you not, sir?
Yes, I do. And it's very good.
Okay. So my point is that what the Social Security Administration is saying is you paid into Social Security and you do deserve a benefit for that. No question about it. You paid in, you get a benefit, but you also have a private pension. And when they do the calculations, what they're telling me is that this new bill would give you and by the way, they passed the bill, did they not? So it is law on the land. You will be getting a higher Social Security benefit. But I believe, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I believe that it's a windfall to people who work part-time in the public sector part-time in the private sector. But you know what? The bill passed. You're going to get your extra money. And I do think great people who keep us safe probably deserve a little extra Social Security anyway. So, Glenn, thank you for the call. Thank you for educating us. And I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. Who do we have next, Mr. Producer? Linda. Linda, you're on the air.
Hi, Steve. I want to agree with you, but people don't understand this, and they certainly don't. As they lower those short-term rates, they keep low, and they plan to lower it again. The long-term rates keep going up. That's an indication that they're expecting the inflation to go up. This, is ridiculous. They have to put them back where they were. It's not too high. It wasn't too high. They did this last time, and that's why we got the inflation.
Okay, hold on, Linda. I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So you're saying you said something was going up. What were you talking about?
The long-term rates.
Oh, the long-term rates, of course. Well,
right.
You're right, and
they're lowering. Yes, they're lowering.
Yes. So you're making a very good point. The law, what determines, this is a good economics lesson for people, so I'm glad you brought this up. The long-term interest rate, think about this, folks, what determines the interest rate on a long-term bond? The most important factor is not just today's inflation rate, it's what the market believes will be the inflation rate in the future. So in other words, if you're buying a 10 or 20 or 30-year bond, you're making a bet about how much inflation will be over that period. And let's say you're expecting a 3%. I'm just using this as an example. Let's say you're expecting a 3% inflation rate over the next 30 years. You're not going to buy the bond for an interest rate less than 3%, or you'd be losing your money. And so I've always believed that the 30-year bond is a very good indicator of where the market is telling us inflation is going. And the long-term bond inflation rate, as you correctly noted, Linda, is up. The interest rate keeps going up, which means, and in fact, since the Fed started cutting the lower interest rates, in other words, the shorter interest rate on the bonds, now the long-term bond is going up, which means that the market is expecting more inflation, which is exactly the opposite of what we want. Linda, great call. I think we have time for one more quick caller before we take a quick break. Do we have one more caller, Mr. Producer? Michael, you're our last caller for this section. Thank you for calling in. What do you got for us, sir?
My question is with this concept of gold, the dollar backing gold, or this government bond being backed by gold. I've always thought, I've been collecting gold since I was like 8 years old. I bought my first gold coin all the way back then, but I've never been a big proponent of gold solely backing the dollar. I've always felt that maybe it should be a basket of commodities. What's your thoughts on this?
So, well, great minds think alike, because as I was saying earlier, my dear friend and one of the smartest guys I know is Steve Forbes. He favors the gold-backed dollar, essentially. I would rather have a dollar that is pegged to a basket of currencies, just like you're talking about, everything from corn and wheat and copper and oil and gas and, all the aluminum, all that stuff, and follow what's happening with those prices. By the way, you can go to I've got my iPhone with me right now. I'm Googling CRB index. I'm doing this as we speak. And the first thing that comes up is something called Trading Economics tracks this CRB index. And the CRB index is a commodity index that follows like 40 or 50 different commodities. And what that CRB index is telling us is that the index is higher now than it has been any time in 5 years. In fact, over just the last year, the CRB index is up by about 15%. So if commodity prices are rising, that means you're not winning the war against inflation. And so I am worried about inflation. I think that the Federal Reserve Board under Jerome Powell is making a mistake by continuing to cut rates, because what really makes me very worried is that they're going to cause another round of inflation. And that's the last thing Donald Trump needs right now. We need a stable dollar. The reason that Trump won the election was there were two main reasons that he won the election. One was people were fed up with high prices, that is inflation. And the other is people were fed up by the fact that we had, 10, 12, 15 million illegal immigrants in the country. Biden did nothing about that. Trump will fix those problems, but he's not going to fix the inflation problem if the Fed continues to lower interest rates. So that's my take on that. Great call. We're up against a hard break. We'll be right back in 1 minute, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
Ei, você aí que gosta tanto de aprender. Sabia que a transição energética justa já faz parte da sua vida? Com a Petrobras, ela está no apoio a projetos socioambientais, no desenvolvimento de energias renováveis e na redução de emissões. Com inovação e respeito ao meio ambiente, a Petrobras é líder na transição energética justa. E isso é bom para todo mundo. Petrobras, o Brasil é a nossa energia. Brasil, União e Reconstrução. E você aí ouvindo um podcast, já tá pensando nas suas férias inesquecíveis para 2025? Conte com a Nomad. Com a conta internacional Nomad, você explora o mundo do seu jeito, pagando como um local, em mais de 180 países com cartão de débito internacional. Abra sua conta.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. We're having a lot of fun this Saturday before Christmas. I hope you've all done your Christmas shopping, or at least you're going to run out to the mall and to the stores and get your last-minute Christmas shopping done. I'm pretty much done. I have some gifts still to get for folks. And I'm relieved, by the way, that this whole budget fight is finally over. But I got to tell you, Donald Trump is inheriting a mess. When Biden came into office, we had a roughly at a $5.5 trillion budget. Now we're up to $7 trillion. Biden has added, by my calculations, about $7 trillion to the debt in 4 years. The deficit is now running over the last 12 months. It's running at a pace of $2 trillion a year. It is a fiscal catastrophe. It is a catastrophe. And it's like Trump is going to need a giant pooper scooper to fix this economy because there's so much debris. And by the way, Joe Biden has a lot of nerve to say, I'm leaving the economy in great shape. No, he's not. He's not leaving the economy in great shape. Just ask the American people if they think that this is an economy that's in great shape. And by the way, they spoke out about this on Election Day when people said, I'm sick of the high inflation. I'm sick of the high deficits. I'm sick of the debt. I'm sick of the transgender nonsense. I'm sick of the fact that we have regulation destroying our great businesses. All of these things, I think, were the reason the American people made a very good decision and changed horses. And we have we're getting on the back of Secretariat, folks. That's the cool thing that is coming. Now, we turn to one of my favorite segments of this show. I have two great friends, Ryan and Bob Payne, who've been sponsors of our show for a long time, and they're good friends of mine. They're smart, because a lot of you, there's a reason we call this the More Money Show. I want you to make more money, and Bob and Ryan Payne are two in the best of the business. So here is their take this week on the economy and the stock market, and we'll be back at the top of the hour.
Hey, it's Ryan Payne and Bob Payne from Payne Capital Management. That's Payne. Coming to you every week on the More Money Show, talking about the markets, the economy, your retirement. And Bob, man, oh man, we had a big sell-off this week on the proverbial, as you like to call it, Street of Dreams. Is this the end, Bob? Is this the beginning of the end? I want to know what's going on in the markets.
I don't know, Ryan. When the market goes up every week, goes up every month, when you get a normal pullback in the market, it's kind of a shock. But, we had good reason for it. The Federal Reserve surprised everybody by predicting that inflation may be a little more sticky than they thought, and they're not going to cut rates as quickly or as soon as we'd like.
Which says to me, Bob, they're worried about inflation, right? The Fed told us before, Jay Powell, the Federal Reserve Chairman, that they beat inflation. They're close to it, but I suspect that's probably not true, right? If you start looking out, inflation estimations or projections are going up. And I think this is something you got to be concerned about when you're building your portfolio. Are you protected against more inflation? It may be more persistent than everyone thought initially.
Well, see, that's the issue, Rye, because, to quote our famous Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, inflation's transitory. It turns out what's transitory is his opinion. A quarter ago, he was dovish. Last week, we got what's called a hawkish cut. Does that hurt more, Rye, when it's a hawkish cut?
I like a dovish cut better, and they like their animals on Wall Street. But it's a great point, right? The Federal Reserve changes their mind a lot. But for your portfolio, what you got to say to yourself is, do I trust the Fed, or do I need to be protected no matter what happens? And I think this is a great reminder this last week that markets don't go straight up all the time. And if your portfolio is relying on markets going up, well, they don't go up every year. That can be a big problem. And that's one thing you got to concentrate on, especially if you're close to retired now, is you need income that's consistent, much more reliable than the ups and downs of the market.
Well, I think you're talking about all those folks that are sitting with all that cash in the money market fund, which is what, 6 trillion, 7 trillion now, right? It just reminds me of that old saying, right? It's opportunities, not guarantees, that produce long-term returns. And we all love those money market funds because they're guaranteed not to go down in value, just to fluctuate in terms of the rate of return. But it's going to drop like a rock now. What do you do if you're sitting there between a rock and a hard place?
Yeah, and I think that's the Fed. What they did this week is they told you, look, the money market fund is going to continue to go lower because they did cut rates. The market did sell off a little bit, so maybe you're nervous about that market volatility. So what do you do right now? And this is why income is much more reliable that you lock into, right? If you lock into some longer term rates right now on bonds, you're going to get that fixed rate of return, not bond funds, right? We don't like bond funds because as rates go up, and rates are going up, believe it or not, longer term, your bond prices go down with no maturity date. And in the market, there's plenty of places where there's income, but most people aren't allocated to that right now.
Hey, look, Brian, no one likes to see their portfolio go down, but I got to tell you, I got a little tingle in my leg this week because this is the week all of our dividends come in for the quarter. And that's the beauty of stocks. They can go up and down in value, but every quarter it's payday, right? And I've got cash coming into my account, my portfolio, and all my clients' portfolios. And I can tell you, I'm not going to sit back and wait and see what happens with somebody at the Federal Reserve. I'm taking advantage of this opportunity and locking in some great dividend yields today.
What I love about that is it's not predicated on what the Fed does this week, right? What happens with interest rates, what happens with inflation, and it's tied to your goals, right? So building consistent income, we can pretty much tell, I'd say with a lot of accuracy, what kind of income is going to come in every year. And more importantly, if inflation is more persistent than the Fed told us, Bob, which I suspect it is, you've got to have income that's going up over time. A portfolio that has dividends that grow over time, that keeps up with inflation. It's like if you own a fixed annuity, my biggest problem with that is it's the same amount of income every year once you lock in. You give up your principal, yet your cost of living is going to continue to go higher. Biggest hurdle that everyone has to solve for in retirement, and with all the portfolios we look at, we're not seeing income-driven portfolios. It's a huge mistake and problem right now.
Well, I got to tell you right now, Rye, I'm shocked. I'm absolutely shocked. You're telling me that these purveyors of these annuity products and these Bitcoin products who come on every day and tell us this is a hedge against inflation, this is a hedge against, prices going up. It's not true.
I know it's shocking, Bob, but all that stuff can be as volatile as hell, if I could say, and it's not going to protect you, especially if we see more inflation. In fact, they do better when inflation's lower, ironically. So you've got to really have real inflation hedges in your portfolio. Biggest mistake we see right now.
Well, that's the thing. And when you look at inflation, it really is that hidden, insidious tax we talk about week after week. It's the biggest risk in your financial plan. Every single one of you, I don't care who you are, how much money you have, inflation is the biggest risk. And there are only two true hedges against inflation, right? You've got to own equities with dividends that go up over time. And you have to have bonds that are guaranteed to come due with your full face value so you can take advantage of whatever the market throws at you.
So what I hear what you're saying, Bob, is don't own bond funds and maybe not put all your money in NVIDIA stock, which pays like no dividend. And in any given year, it can go down something like 50%, 60%, depending on the year. And I think that's what no one's looking at right now. The problem is in a big booming bull market is we forget about the downside risk in the future. And that's where you have to ask yourself or run the numbers to see in a bad market, is my portfolio going to hold up? Am I going to be able to live off my portfolio? And I would say a lot of you are in big trouble right now because in a down market, there's just way too much risk that's being covered up by the fact that prices are going higher.
Well, Rye, I just finished all of my holiday shopping and I got you a lot of nice gifts. And the good news was I was able to buy those gifts with income from my portfolio. I didn't have to sell stocks that were up so I could pay the government capital gains tax and income tax. I don't know about you, but I don't like paying taxes.
Bob, nobody likes paying taxes. But I would say right now, at the end of the year, there are a lot of things you can do proactively as well, right? If you have any tax losses on your portfolio, great time to take them that you can use in the future against future gains. But again, I think being proactive right now, and when you get these sell-offs in the market, this can be a gift from the gods, right? It gives you an opportunity to reallocate. If you've been sitting with way too much money in money market funds right now, this is those small windows you get to reallocate your portfolio. You got to take advantage of it. And most of us want to put our head in the sand. Wrong strategy.
Well, I'm not going to sit around and wait to see if this is a Santa rally or not, right? I know over time, stocks outperform bonds, bonds outperform cash. It's time to get out of cash and get into stocks and bonds so that you have your future secure and your family's wealth will continue to grow.
Bob, I'm convinced. And if you're thinking to yourself right now, okay, I get it, Bob and Ryan. I need to have income on my portfolio. I need to protect my portfolio. Well, here's your shot to do it. We're going to keep 10 slots open as we always do for the whole show. If you saved over $1 million for your retirement, Bob and I will run for your now famous Total Financial Master Plan, and we'll do that with no obligation or cost. It's a full, free, holistic review where we literally look at everything. There's not a firm out there that will do this work up front. We're going to go as far as building you your own personalized financial portfolio. We're going to give you a bird's eye view of your entire financial life and hone in on every issue you need to address today, whether it's that income plan for retirement. How do you draw from your portfolio? How do you take Social Security? We're going to build a dynamic income plan factoring in inflation so you don't run out of money. We're going to look at diversification. Markets have been all over the place the last 2 years. Has your portfolio been up and down like a yo-yo too? Or have you been sitting with way too much money in money market funds and cash, CDs, paralysis by analysis, can't figure out what to do? We're going to put together a full investment game plan tied to your goals, show you how to grow your wealth, but most importantly, protect it over the rest of your life. And we're going to look at fees and taxes. Wall Street loves to sell you those high cost, tax inefficient products, whether it's an annuity, insurance product, brokerage product, structured product, mutual fund. We're going to do a deep dive of every investment you own, show you how to reduce the cost and optimize your portfolio for taxes. It's not what you make, it's what you take. You'll get our full tax playbook. We have 10 slots if you saved over $1 million and you call or text right now.
If you're one of our next 10 callers and you've saved over $1 million for your retirement, our team of financial advisors and certified financial planners will help you to create your own unique total financial master plan. Now, there's no obligation. There's no cost. Actually, there's no other firm that will do this for you up front at no cost, but you won't have a plan if you're not one of our next 10 callers. Call right now, 844-752-6692. That's 844-752-6692, or just simply call 844-PLAN-NYC. That's 844-PLAN-NYC.
If you'll learn more about myself and Bob and our firm, Payne Capital Management, that's Payne, simply go to BeBullish.com. That's BeBullish.com. Stay tuned. We got more money coming your way.
Talvez você já conheça a gente. Ainda não? Bem, nós somos a Novo Nordisk. Nós ressignificamos os rumos na pesquisa sobre obesidade. Não é à toa. Temos mais de 100 anos de pesquisa em saúde em busca de inovações. Controle de peso ainda é um desafio, mas agora milhões de pessoas no mundo todo podem trilhar um caminho para uma vida mais saudável. Novo Nordisk. Um novo norte contra a obesidade.
Você que está ouvindo o seu podcast, já sabe qual é o efeito do novo Hyundai Creta N-Line em você? Sofisticado, com design e os acabamentos internos exclusivos da linha N-Line. Tecnológico, com o display panorâmico e todos os itens de assistência ao condutor. Confortável, com amplo espaço interno e o maior teto solar panorâmico da categoria. Bom, que tal você mesmo descobrir esse efeito? Chegou o novo Hyundai Creta N-Line, tão poderoso quanto o seu estilo.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the second hour of the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. I am your host, Steve Moore, economist, and I work with the Heritage Foundation. I have I worked 10 years at the Wall Street Journal on the editorial board there. I hope you all read the Wall Street Journal editorial page. I also work at the Heritage Foundation and other groups. And the whole idea is to promote free enterprise and to promote free markets and to make America richer and more prosperous. And speaking of which, I run a group called the Unleash Prosperity. And that involves Larry Kudlow and Art Laffer, Steve Forbes, myself, and many, many other of the top economists in the country. So go to unleashprosperity.com and sign up for our hotline. It is free. I don't understand why everybody in the country hasn't signed up for it, but we have hundreds of thousands of readers of that every day. I wanted to mention, I get so many fun emails and texts from people throughout the show. If we're live, by the way, we are live. We're in color. We're one of the few shows on this prior to Christmas Saturday that is live and in color. And we will be taking your calls throughout the rest of the hour. 1-800-848-9222 is our More Money hotline, 1-800-848-9222. Our question of the day is, what do you want Santa Claus to bring for our country, not for yourself or not for your spouse or your kids, but what should Santa Claus bring for our country this year to make us a better country, a more prosperous country, and a more peaceful country? And I have a lot of things on my list. And by the way, one of the things I wanted was I was one of the first people who suggested that we have a government reform commission. And then a month later, maybe Donald Trump is listening to this show, because a month later, he decided to create DOGE, which is, of course, the Department of Government Efficiency. And they're going to do just that. They're going to weed out a lot of the waste. But anyway, back to what I was just talking about. So I got this great text from one of the listeners who said, I can't call in, but I wanted to tell you what I want, for our country in 2025. He said, this is so classic. He says, I want the Democrats to get a brain and I want the Republicans to get a spine. and I think that's a good one. We need the Republicans to get a spine, and we need the Democrats to get a brain. And by the way, sometimes we also need the Republicans to get a brain too, because sometimes they don't act very smart. In fact, I think a lot of the histrionics this week with the budget was a little bit over the top, quite frankly. I mean, we've got to just get Trump in the White House. He comes, inauguration day is January 20, January 21, we hit the ground running. And I want to just get the budget over with. Like, it's a total catastrophe. Everyone knows what's happening in Washington is a damn mess. Trump is going to have to clean this up, but let him do it. Let him do it. Trump will lead if Congress will follow. And there's so many things he can do even without the support of Congress in terms of executive orders. He's going to make great appointments. I love the people that he's put in these high-level positions. I like Scott Bessent a lot as our next Treasury Secretary. I like Kevin Hassett, who's going to be running the National Economic Council. He's fantastic. By the way, I love these guys who are running, for example, the Department of Energy. We're actually going to put somebody in the Department of Energy who actually supports American energy. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, right? Because the Energy Secretary was Tim, the governor of Michigan, right? It was, what was her name?
Jennifer Granholm.
Oh, yes. Granholm, who basically did, for 4 years, all she did was try to destroy American energy. I want an American Energy Department of Energy Secretary who actually supports energy. So Chris Wright is coming in there. He's fantastic, guys. He ran a company. You'll love this. It's called Liberty Energy. He became very rich because he's really a smart guy, and he has the total program. And we have so many other great people. By the way, I think it's going to be really interesting what happens with RFK Jr. I happen to agree with a lot of what he's saying. I don't agree with everything he says, but I think to really look at the kind of healthcare industrial complex and how much money is wasted there is a good thing. Wanted to mention this other news story. I mean, there's so many crazy news stories going on. They come across my desk all the time, and we highlight a lot of these in the hotline. One of the ones we highlighted the other day is that California wants to move ahead unilaterally. In other words, just like they don't care what the rest of the country is doing, California wants to move ahead with banning gas cars by 2035. So I guess that means you can't buy or make or produce or sell a gas car starting in 2035. Now, there's a big debate about whether California has the right to do that under what's called the Commerce Clause. Some people say that's a violation of the Interstate Commerce Clause. Here's my feeling about this. And I don't know if we have listeners I don't know if our station reaches all the way to the West Coast in California. I know we have a lot of people listening online because we have a great audience. But my feeling is, look, if California wants to ban gas cars or gas stoves, or if they want to ban, I don't know, toilet paper, or they want to ban all this stuff, I mean, let them. I believe in states' rights. If they want to do it, go ahead, let them do all these things. And guess what? Everybody's just going to move out of California. They have totally destroyed that great state. And I've said this so many times on this show. I think California is one of those beautiful, idyllic, heavenly places on earth in terms of the weather, the gorgeous mountains, the gorgeous beaches, the incredible diversity of that state. And yet it's being destroyed by the politicians. If you want to understand what happens when you put progressives in charge, go to California, or go to the place I'm going to later today. I have to fly to Chicago, where it's a balmy 12 degrees. But, Chicago is a wonderful, wonderful city. It's a beautiful city. I just adore Chicago. I don't adore the cold weather. But it's being destroyed by a terrible mayor, Brandon Johnson, who's a socialist, and a terrible governor, J.B. Pritzker. And by the way, Pritzker wants to run for president. That's how crazy the Democrats are today. But I wonder what you think about that. Do you think California should be able to ban cars if they want to? I don't know what the legal issue is there. By the way, Tim Desher, who is my wingman on this show and the producer, and I both have wives from California, so we think the girls are beautiful in California as well. And so that's where we're at. We will come back in 1 minute with my good friend Tom Del Beccaro, who is one of the most incisive political commentators in America. You see him all the time on Fox News. And then later in the hour, we're going to have John Fund to talk about how did we do on the elections in terms of election integrity. And then throughout the next 45 minutes or so, we will be taking your calls, 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848 WABC. 1-800-848-WABC is our More Money hotline. We'll be right back in 60 seconds.
Sonha em fazer faculdade, mas tem medo de não dar conta? Calma. Escuta só o recado da Rebeca Andrade.
Brilha sem medo. A universidade é o seu lugar, sim. E a Estácio tem soluções que provam isso. Acredita, eu também sou aluna.
Viu só? Agora aproveita que os cursos estão a partir de R$ 129 por mês. E inscreva-se em estácio.br.
Brilha sem medo. Brilha com a maior do Brasil.
Você ama ter mais flexibilidade para estudar. Use a sua nota do Enem e venha para Anhembi Morumbi. Aqui você pode escolher qual modalidade se adapta melhor à sua rotina. Presencial, semipresencial ou ensino à distância. Tudo com uma metodologia inovadora e prática desde o início do curso. Descubra por que milhares de alunos amam estudar aqui. Acesse anhembi.br e garanta a sua vaga mesmo antes do Enem. Anhembi Morumbi. Aqui tudo acontece.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas, isn't it? It really is. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas, and I hope everyone will have a holly jolly Christmas. I'm headed to Chicago, where it's going to be 12 degrees. I hope maybe some of you, I know a lot of you will be remaining in the New York area, or, why not go to Florida? Why not go to Honolulu? Why not go somewhere where it is sunny and warm? Although, look, I have to say, I love a white Christmas, and we'll probably have a white Christmas in Chicago. Hopefully in much of the Northeast, they'll have a white Christmas as well. I wanted to, we're going to bring on my friend Tom Del Beccaro in 1 minute, but Harry has been waiting very patiently on the phone. So, Harry, thanks so much for waiting. What do you got for us, sir?
Hi, Steve. Quickly, I have a few points. I'll try to be brief. Last week, you were talking about the fraud with the PPP and all these COVID programs. I tried to call back. During the end of COVID, The SBA, who oversaw these funds, both in the New York City office and in Washington, D.C., general counsel, to report some fraud, they would not call me back. So I finally gave up. So they didn't want
Harry, let me just cut you off there and say we have the most unresponsive government of all time. I mean, I'll tell you why you're not hearing back from a lot of these agencies is because guess what? Nobody is working in the federal agencies. They're all, we've got 10% of the federal workers that are showing up on time and 40 hours a week. And my feeling is if these people aren't going to be responsive to the citizens who pay their salaries, then get rid of them. I'm just sick of it. I want to next bring on my guest, Tom Del Beccaro. Tom is an amazing guy. He and I have been friends for ages. We're both pretty old. And Tom has a really, by the way, he was the head of the Republican Party in California. I want to talk about the patron saint of losing causes. Being the head of the Republican Party in California is a probably tough thing to do, but he did a great job. I think, Tom, by the way, didn't you debate Kamala Harris?
I did debate the empty suit that was Kamala Harris back then. We just didn't know exactly how empty she was until she got as far as she did. Thanks for having me on, Steve. Merry Christmas to everyone. Steve, talking about California and banning of cars, here's the reality. California does not have the capacity to handle the EVs that it does now. Remember, you get these brownouts in California today, right? Where they tell you don't use certain utilities like your dryer in the middle of the day, wait till the evening when business is down. And they said you can't, there was also the don't charge your car during the middle of the day kind of thing. So how the heck do they plan to have nothing but those kind of cars? Another thing that is ludicrous because they're demanding that the 18-wheelers also be electric. Well, here's what isn't factored into that green debacle. 18-wheelers require about 10 or 11,000 pounds of batteries, 2 full-size or more cars. And so that, of course, you can't go from LA to San Francisco on one charge, but more importantly, the damage to the roadways.
Oh, it would be terrible. I mean, and by the way, also, Tom, I mean, you're right, the damage because the weight would be so huge, but also, I mean, imagine trying to drive an 18-wheeler across country. You have to recharge the battery every couple hours. It would take you forever to get across the country or to get from one state to another. I mean, it is so absurd. By the way, Tom, I was asking our listeners earlier on the show, I don't know if you were listening, that there's a big issue about whether California, under the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, should have the right to abolish gas cars. I tend to always favor states' rights. If I think states should even have the right to do stupid things if they want to. But I wonder what you think about that.
Well, I want to start out by saying this wasn't voted on by anybody. That's true. This was a regulatory decision.
Right.
So it isn't. That adds a different layer to it. Can a single person, the governor, push an executive order that shuts down the economy or shuts down such a large sector of the economy? We're going to have to see. But also keep in mind that shutdown, look at the Chevron decision. Does that have anything to say with this? Because yes, they should have a reasonable ability to clear the skies of pollution, but does that mean that they can go this far? I think it will wind up in the Supreme Court. I'm not sure where they will come down on this, but can a state bar something of that size and nature? I'm with you. I think. Look, years ago when California, there was a movement, they wanted to secede. I was all for it. Because if California seceded...
Let California secede. If they want to be their own country, I mean, look, I love California, but you're right, Tom. I mean, there are a lot of crazy people there. I mean, Gavin Newsom is one of the worst governors in America. By the way, if you go to the betting markets, Tom, right now, Gavin Newsom is one of the top 4, highest in terms of, I think it goes J.D. Vance. And then I think second on that list is Gavin Newsom. And I don't get it. They act as if Gavin Newsom is some kind of a modern hero. He's driven California into the ground.
Yeah, one of the two things. One of the biggest winners of 2024 was J.D. Vance, because if you'd have taken a poll 3 years ago, who's the likely presidential nominee in 2028, J.D. Vance wasn't on that list.
Right.
And now he's number one. So he's a huge winner for that. As far as Gavin Newsom, remember, there's probably going to be 30 people running for president on the Democrat side in 2028, which means a winner on the first primary probably only needs to get 15, 16%. And so then there's name ID. And remember, I don't think this party is capable of getting away from its social justice warfare. They don't do the economics of it, right? They don't see that people want to have jobs and control their own future. So the reason why he's up there is because he's got big name ID. He's got big money behind him in Getty Still and Nancy Pelosi, who for all her, we dislike her policies, but the woman knows how to raise some money. So I understand why he's, in lane two. He would be a disaster for the country like he is for California.
So I don't know if you saw this story the other day, Tom, that was in the Wall Street Journal, and it's now, it's been, that story has been picked up everywhere, that Biden's doing a last minute shopping spree. He's spending every single penny he can get his hands on when he's not asleep. And it's amazing how much money they just flushing out the door as fast as they can. As I use the analogy of them, taking all the sofas in the federal government and shaking them out to see if any quarters drop out so they can spend them. But did you see that the United States government is giving a $15 billion, not $15 million, $15 billion quote loan, and I have that in air quotes because I don't think it's really a loan. I think it's a subsidy payment to PG&E, which is, I think, the largest utility company in California. You know more about this than I do. But why do they have to give the $15 billion loan to California's largest utility company? Because they've had the Green New Deal and it's bankrupting the state. They're running out of energy. The utility's running out of money. And my feeling is, why should people in Maine or Wisconsin or Illinois or New York or Florida have to pay more taxes to bail out California's utility companies?
Yeah, absolutely. And, BG&E has declared bankruptcy in the past, too, and they were hit with all these lawsuits related to the big fires where we don't take care of our forests or thin them at all. And then PG&E got hit with those big things as well. You're right. Just like the 1,500-page bill, why should the taxpayers in Minnesota be paying for a stadium in Washington, D.C.? So I think the biggest dynamic, 20, 30 years ago, I used to tell people that if only Americans knew what they were getting out of government, they would stop paying for it. And I think the biggest dynamic going into the next year will be this DOGE effort, because if they can shine a light on all of the vermin that is federal spending, the possibility that we could get our house in order is remarkable. And instead of the backroom deal, you're going to have it all over Twitter that so-and-so politician. And if we can shame that process, we got a shot here of getting the budget under. And I think that's going to be the biggest dynamic politically, other than the fall of Iran. That will be our biggest domestic story next year.
So I'm talking to the great Tom Del Beccaro, who is you see him all the time on Fox News. He's a political commentator. He was actually the head of the Republican Party in California, America's largest state, for many years. Now you're out of California now, right, Tom?
No. I have my law firm there. Unfortunately, I have a bad habit of buying things, so I still have to work a little bit here. I'm trying to prop up the California economy, which lost. Federally, Steve, they were lying about how many jobs were being created. It turns out that California was lying as well. And the first 6 months of this year, lost over 70,000 jobs. And yet Gavin Newsom says that he's been producing high-paying jobs. Well, it turns out he was lying as well.
Well, gee, what a shock. So Tom has a great book, and we only have about 3 minutes left, Tom. I appreciate you taking some time out on the Saturday before Christmas. But Tom has a wonderful book that I think people should get as a stocking stuffer or a gift to one of your family members or one of your friends, because it's a great history lesson. And the title of the book, it just came out about 6 or 9 months ago, is called The Lessons of the American Civilization. And I love the subtitle. It's Confident Rise and the Warning Signs of Its Decline. And I wonder, just in the last couple of minutes, if you can tell people, what is the important message of this book?
Well, there's a lot of messages in there, but its confident rise was when we were a civilization that relied on self-responsibility and free markets, and produced immense wealth, which created the middle class. Then, starting at post-industrialization, but also with the banking crisis, we slowly began to grow government to the extent today that it weighs the economy down. Yes. And we seek to redistribute. Well, the greatest threat to America today is the size of our government, not only because it's intrusive with the FBI, but it's lowering the growth rate to nearly flat. Remember, Europe has had no growth in the last 30 years, literally 0.1%. America can't do that, because if it does that, Social Security goes bankrupt, Medicare goes bankrupt, standard of livings fall, and division will rise here, because America's DNA is what Coolidge said. America is about business. It's about opportunity. And if we have a flatline economy, then Americans who came here from around the world who don't share a cultural DNA, actual DNA, will, whenever the economy is bad, we fight among ourselves. So we need to learn that lesson. We don't have to go the route of Europe.
Yeah, well, that's a great point, Tom. It's and by the way, this idea that the business of America is business, which is a famous saying, is the guy who really gets that, of course, is the great Donald J. Trump. Tom Del Beccaro, great book, great being with you. I hope you and your lovely new wife have a wonderful, wonderful Christmas. Folks, we'll be right back. We've got John Funn coming on to tell us about how the election integrity issue turned out in 2024. And then we will be taking more of your callers on the More Money Hotline up to that top of the hour. 1-800-848-9222 is the More Money Hotline. We'll be right back in 60 seconds.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Hello, folks. This is the best time of the year. It is beginning to look a lot like Christmas. I hope you all are having a holy and happy holiday season, and I hope you're going to be with your family and beloved friends and the people you love this Christmas week, because it is. I'll be getting together with my family. I think there's going to be like 25 of us. I come from a big family, and it's wonderful, wonderful time to sit around the Christmas tree and just have a great time with the people who you are, your family and your loved ones. So I hope you all have the opportunity to do that. We're just going to take one or two quick callers before we take another break, because we're waiting for my good friend John Funn. Who is next in line, Mr. Producer?
Rich from New Jersey.
Rich from New Jersey. Thanks so much for calling in, sir.
Steve, thanks for taking my call. My question is about the budget deficit and the budget agreement. I generally believe that government shutdowns are much ado about nothing. I don't worry about them. I think they're fine. But I'm wondering if this time is different. I read just last night that without an agreement, the budget, the deficit cap, the deficit limit goes down to $31 trillion on January 1 if there's no agreement, and our debt's at $35 trillion.
Yeah.
So my question
Rich,
is this.
Yeah. Okay. So I will ask you a question, but before I let you get off, I want to ask you this. What do you think that they should do? I mean, if you were running the Congress and you see this obscene amount of money that we're spending and borrowing, what would you like to see them do?
Oh, they've got to cut spending dramatically. Right. We need 2 generations of fiscal responsibility. Yep. I've been worried about government overspending since 1987.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Me too. Me too, Rich. And I've been in Washington for 40 years. Great call, by the way, and great question. And I've got to tell you this, folks. When I first came to Washington, it was late 1983. So 40 years ago. It's hard to believe. God, 40 years I've been in Washington doing policy and economics and budget stuff. And back then, just to give you a sense of how things have changed, under Reagan, we passed the first $1 trillion budget ever. We'd never spent $1 trillion in 1 year. And we surpassed the $1 trillion mark on the debt. And so we had $1 trillion deficit. $1 trillion budget and a $1 trillion debt. And here we are 40 years later, and we have a debt that's it's over $35 trillion now. I can't even keep track of it. And we have a budget that's $7 trillion. And by the way, the new numbers just came out for the first 2 months of the fiscal year because, the fiscal year started on October 1st. So we have all of October and all of November. We don't have the December numbers in yet. And they're spending at a faster pace than they were in 2023. I mean, it never slows down. It's like a locomotion that just goes faster and faster down the rails. And of course, the rails will end up going over a cliff. And so this is a very dangerous situation. Now, on the continuing resolution that they passed, it's just basically keeping the government on automatic pilot. It's a disgusting dereliction of duty by Congress to just keep spending this money and whistling Dixie and pretending like everything's going to be okay. And folks, I'm here to tell you, well, if we keep doing this, it's not going to be okay because I do believe there will be a financial crisis. And I don't know when it's going to be, if it's going to be in 3 months or 3 years or 5 years, but there will be a financial crisis that is going to make look like a picnic what happened in 2008. Remember that when so many of the banks failed? And this will happen unless we turn this ship of state around. The ship of state around. And so the fact that neither party seems to want to do that is very troubling to me. And by the way, I love Donald Trump. I think he's going to do amazing things for our country. But even Donald Trump likes to spend money. And I love the guy. I've worked with them. But this is what people do. They like to come to Washington and spend money. There was, one of my favorite presidents is Calvin Coolidge, who had a sign on his desk that said 90% of people come to Washington wanting something they shouldn't have. And that's so true. They want our money. People come to Washington with a tin cup in their hand. Gimme, 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 gimme. And we've given out so much money that we're bankrupting the people and the businesses that make our country great. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with my good friend John Fund, and we will take more calls. We got one open line, 1-800-848-9222. Hope you're having a wonderful Christmas season.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. We're having so much fun today. I love this job, by the way. I love being able to sit in front of this microphone and talk to you all for 2 hours every Saturday afternoon. We're on from 1 to 3 p.m. every Saturday afternoon. We have affiliates throughout the country. I love it, by the way. It means so much to me when people come up to me. I was in New York last week and at a restaurant, and I don't know, 10 people came up to me and said, "Oh, I love More Money. It's a great show." And thank you. And by the way, we're working out the kink. I'm not the greatest radio talk show host, but I do have some of the greatest people on. Like today, we had Steve Forbes and other. And by the way, is John Fund ready, Mr. Producer?
Yes.
Do we have John Fund? Are you there?
I am.
Hey, John, thanks so much for joining on this Saturday before Christmas. I know it's a crazy period. Give me, John, your sense of what happened this past week with the whole hullabaloo over the budget. You and I have lived through this kind of thing, 15 times over the last 20 years. How do you score it? Do you think who's the winner, who's the loser, and where are we at?
Well, the first thing you have to remember is Joe Biden is at least technically still president. He hasn't left the building.
Yeah.
When he's awake. So he does have the veto pen, and he does have some leverage over Democrats. And then the Democrats control the Senate, so Chuck Schumer can ram something through the Senate if he really wants to.
Yes.
And the House, the Republican majority with some vacancies, is tissue paper thin.
That's
so
right.
Given that, what Speaker Johnson did originally was he said, well, I really need to help the farmers. They haven't had a farm bill, and we really need to have these disaster spending in North Carolina passed. So I'm going to demand that goes in the continuing resolution. And the price for that from the Democrats was all this extra spending. Mm-hmm. Well, there was a revolt led by Elon Musk, joined in by lots of others, including Donald Trump.
By the way, does Elon Musk have a vote here? I don't think he's a member of the House of Representatives, is he?
Let's just say he has powerful psychic influence over members, especially those who might face primaries in the Republican Party. But anyway, what happened was, so the talk radio, the internet, podcasters, and everybody, there were millions of people who were reading Elon's tweets, not all of which were accurate, but enough were that people were just furious at this. This is not what they voted for. Yeah. So Trump gets into the act. Johnson pulls the bill and tries again. That doesn't work because 34 Republicans vote against it. Mm-hmm. Then he says, well, we're coming up to a deadline, and even the Democrats don't want to shut the government down because, Joe Biden complicates matters in assigning the blame for that. So what they did is they passed a relatively clean bill for 3 months till March, plus a debt extension, not really the lifting of the debt ceiling. And the end result, despite all of the mess and all of the Sturm and Drang, Steve, we ended up getting rid of a lot of the Democratic spending. So Speaker Johnson and the Republicans, by accident as well as intent, managed to come up with a better outcome than we usually get from this mess.
Well, I know, John, it was shorter because I think that the first bill was like 1,500 pages, and then they passed what I think they call the skinny bill, which is, that's good. The less pages, the less that they're spending. So I'm glad to hear you tell me this. And by the way, I think I was just on Fox News earlier today saying I think Speaker Johnson has done a pretty good job here. It's a tough job, as you know, being Speaker of the House, especially when you have a 2 or 3 seat majority. But all in all, I think all this talk, we got to get rid of Johnson as a speaker, I think is kind of stupid. I think the guy's a strong conservative. I think he's a good spokesperson for the party. And I think given the fact, by the way, what, John, is the Republican majority coming in? Because have they finished counting all the votes in California yet?
Yes, they did. So from the election, we ended up with 220 Republicans and 215 Democrats.
Yep.
Now, the problem is we have Mr. Gates has vacated his seat. As soon as Mr. Waltz becomes head of the National Security Council, that seat will be vacant. If Elise Stefanik becomes UN ambassador, that vacates that seat. So we're down to 217 to 215 at that point.
Wow.
Now, no one talks about this, but there are a couple Democrats who were very sick. One has esophageal cancer, the other has other health difficulties, and they almost never show up, one from Arizona and one from Georgia. So the 217 to 215 is notional depending on if these ill Democrats show up. So there's perhaps a little bit more of a cushion, but not by much. The bottom line, Steve, and what you're saying is this. Even if Speaker Johnson can be faulted, even if he, stumbles, who else would be able to unite a Republican Party around one candidate with no one? Because remember, the House is elected by the entire House, not just the Republican caucus. So you can't afford more than 1, 2, or 3 defections.
So, the fact is that I thought Speaker Johnson was very funny when he was asked because, there was a little hullabaloo about maybe Elon Musk becoming the Speaker of the House because the Speaker of the House does not have to be an elected member of the House. And so Speaker Johnson was asked about, what do you think about Elon Musk being the Speaker of the House? And he said, if Elon Musk wants this job, he can have it because it's a pretty tough job, especially when you have a 1 or 2 seat majority, John. So you're saying that on balance, go ahead.
Well, let's just say Elon Musk is CEO and president of 6 different companies, from space to electric cars. I think that kind of juggling act is nothing compared to juggling the egos of 220 Republicans who range all the way from Marjorie Taylor Greene to Brian Fitzpatrick, a moderate from Pennsylvania. It's an impossible job. Elon is smart enough not to want it, but I think he needs to stick to the Government Efficiency Commission and pressure Congress to follow and pass its recommendations.
So I'm talking to John Fund. You all know John Fund from Fox News. You all know him he and I served together, I think, 10 years together on the Wall Street Journal editorial board. He was there a lot longer than I was and is now also a writer for National Review, and you see him all over the place, and he is one of the smartest political minds I know. So, John, you've got a situation now where a lot of conservatives are kind of angry about the way that this budget fight turned out. Now, one of the things that Trump wanted was to have the debt ceiling extended through, a new debt ceiling, so he didn't have to deal with the debt ceiling. And he did not win that fight, right? The bill that was passed by Congress will still require a fight on the debt ceiling coming up, as I understand it.
Yes, sometime in March, but it buys some time. And by then, I think Donald Trump would have changed the dynamic of Washington. Because remember, on January 20th, he's going to sign dozens of executive orders.
Yes.
There's going to be some action on the border very quickly. I think by March, if Trump plays his cards properly, he will be in a better position. And remember, his popularity is the highest it's ever been. It's over 50%. It's between 50 and 54% of people approving because they see action and they see somebody being dynamic and taking on the bureaucracies. Donald Trump was an ingenue. He was a babe in the woods when he became president the first time in 2017. He has a much better focus and idea of what the job is and how to, negotiate the levers of power.
So, John, we just have 2 minutes left, and I appreciate you coming on. I'm talking to the great John Fund, coming on the Saturday afternoon before Christmas. Very quickly, what are the election integrity lessons from 2024? You're the world's expert on election integrity. You wrote the book about stealing elections. What did we learn?
Well, the first thing we learned is that other countries around the world during COVID conducted their elections normally. South Korea in April of 2000 had 54 million, a nation of 54 million. Everybody voted in person at the polls. They took precautions, but it worked out just fine. We made a big mistake by having the left and public health officials like Anthony Fauci intimidate us into throwing aside the rule book and creating emergency measures without legislatures passing them. These were emergency proclamations from governors and public health officials that basically said you can have a mail-in ballot. It can be anything. It can be mailed in any time. It can be counted any time. It doesn't have to have a postmark in some states to even be counted if it's mailed after Election Day. It was a mess. And we saw 42% of all ballots in 2020 cast by mail-in vote. Now, this year that went down. It went down to about 37%, but it was much more structured. There were more states like Georgia and Arizona, which Donald Trump carried, had much more rigorous safeguards and signature verification. So in general, the situation was better. But the blue states, California, Nevada, other states, and a couple of other swing states like Wisconsin still have enormous holes like Swiss cheese in their election law, and we have to try to plug them because they still mean that Democrats and others basically can make up the rule book as they go along because the rules are so loosey-goosey.
John Fund, formerly from the Wall Street Journal, now with National Review, also with Unleash Prosperity, and also a regular on Fox News. I appreciate so much you joining us, John. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. Mr. Producer, I wanted to try to squeeze in one or two more quick callers if we could, because I know we've had people very patiently waiting.
Yes, we have Buddy from New Jersey.
Betty from New Jersey. What have you got for us, Betty? Merry Christmas.
Hello, Steve. Thank you. Great interview with Steve Forbes. You two are right on the money. I just want to talk about Donald Trump's tax cuts in 2017. At that time, I was working for the New Jersey Division of Taxation, making $55,000 a year. That tax cut that came through in September or October gave me an extra $130 a paycheck. I went out and bought a Honda Accord for $270 a month. So my life improved. I spurred the economy on, all from the Trump tax cuts. And that's what will happen again.
Oh, I love that. That's a great story. I appreciate you calling in. It is a wonderful story about the impact of the Trump tax cut. And it reminds me that something I have to tell you all before we sign off is that the tax cuts will expire automatically. Okay. This is the thing that a lot of Americans don't understand. I think we've got such a smart audience. I think you all do understand this. But if Congress does nothing, then we go back to the old tax code, which was crappy. That was a terrible tax system. We improved the tax system so much. We allowed people to not having to itemize their deductions. You could take the standard deduction. You didn't have to keep shoeboxes of receipts. We reduced the death tax on American families, the most unfair and unjust tax of all. We got rid of, remember, for all intents and purposes, we got rid of the alternative minimum tax. We made it easier for small businessmen and women to keep more of their own money and invest more in their companies. We did so many amazing things with that tax bill. We brought the highest tax rate down from the highest tax rate on our business in the world to below the average, which brought trillions of dollars money back to our economy. In other words, it was a success. And by the way, the revenues have come in higher under the new tax system than they did under the old tax system. So why would we want to do that? We simplified the system. We made it more pro-growth. We brought a lot of jobs back to the United States under Donald Trump. And that's not going to happen at the end of this year if we don't pass this tax bill. So Republicans in Congress, stop fiddling, stop delaying this, get it done in the first 150 days, extend the Trump tax cuts, get rid of the taxes on cash tips, and do other things that make the American economy more efficient. If the Democrats are going to stand in the way, we got to get rid of those people, because Donald Trump has a mandate from the voters to make the Trump tax cuts permanent, to grow the economy, to create more jobs, to secure the border, to get rid of the drugs that are, contaminating our country. And I'm here to tell you, folks, it's going to be a great new year because he is going to do that. I guarantee you. We're going to hear one last word from my two favorite financial advisors. That is the Paynes, Bob and Ryan Payne. But before I sign off, I just want to tell you all, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful Christmas. I hope you're with your family, and we'll be with you next week on the More Money Show. Same bat time, same bat channel. Have a great weekend, folks.